Finance Budget Report. Administration will update the board on the development of the district's 2016-17 budget. This item provides an opportunity for the board's information and discussion.
Good evening, Mr. Freeman.
Good evening. Let me get my file up. There we go.
And he's done.
Did you read all that?
Thank you.
Dr. Skine said I needed to be quick, so I'll go back and take a breath now. President Arnold, Superintendent Allison, members of the board, and Dr. Thompson. I actually have two presentations tonight, okay? And I separated them because when we post them out on the website, it might be more beneficial to our public to see a budget report and then the cash flow or the cash balances piece as separate things, so if they want to refer to them. So that's the reason why you're going to see two different things. So tonight we're going to do a couple of major things. One is I'm going to provide you with a revised cost estimate, and you'll see it's no longer a range. It will be a single number. And then we're going to look at what we're going to call Phase 1 recommendations for you, and they're really it's recommendations on options. So there'll be some that we're changing. Will change as we move forward with this. And then we're going to have a little discussion on a couple of other things that are not actual recommendations, just an update on what we're currently working on. And then we'll have a little bit of a timeline discussion on what we're needing to do over the next few weeks, and then what the budget adoption timeline actually looks like. And then the separate presentation on unencumbered cash balances. So this is a revised summary of estimated cost increases for FY17 as of tonight. And I say that because it could possibly change again as we move forward. And what I've provided for you is the column that says previous high estimate. So that's the high end, the $30 million estimate that I had. In comparison to what I'm bringing that down to as kind of our target. The highlighted lines are the ones that I have made changes to, as you can see. The transportation contract is just a slight reduction, just reevaluating the number of buses and that sort of thing. And my estimates have been calculated on a big bus, and that we know that there will be some small bus items. So I pulled that one down just a little bit, rounded it off basically to give us a little bit more room to work. The software changes that are here, really the $500,000 is the additional funding in next fiscal year to help us address our security issues on our network. And in the agenda tonight, you approved authority. $1.5 million of that authority is out of this current fiscal year through reallocation of budget dollars, and so that leaves us with only $500,000 needed for next year's budget to address our security needs on the computer network system. The health insurance reserves I reduced back down to the original $12 million top end. The claims that we have been receiving for the last several months have stayed a little bit lower than what I had originally projected. So my end of the year cash balances have come up a little bit on that. So the $12 million is back in the works for having to address our reserve needs in that case. The textbook number, the high number was $5 million. I'm bringing that down to $2.5 million. We currently have about $7 million in that fund. We're trying to build it up to $9 to $10 million to allow some adoptions in the next fiscal year. And the $2.5 million will get us pretty close to there so that we don't have to put off one of the adoptions. We're still working on all the work for that. Committees are currently working and looking at things right now, so we'll have a better idea of what that may look like by the end of this fiscal year if it changes any at all. The next reduction there is regular enrollment. Look back at some of our patterns over the last year and decided we would pull back on the regular enrollment by $1 million, bring it down to $500,000. And there's another explanation a little bit later that where I'll talk about what kind of risk that may mean for us. So you get down to the bottom line, we're looking at $22.7 million is kind of our target right now. And hopefully we can bring some of those numbers down a little bit more and to be able to not have to make such drastic cuts in some of the areas. So, Phase 1 options for consideration. First thing, I just gave you the cost increases, and now I'm going to make some recommendations on reducing those. So after I went through and worked through the cost increases, and now I'm going to make some recommendations on reducing those even further, and we'll explain a little bit about what is happening. The first one actually is a positive. If you'll recall from the health presentation from, maybe a month ago, seems like a long time ago, we talked about fees that are applied to our health plan being self-insured, and one of them is a transitional reinsurance fee. That's a fee levied by, as a part of the Affordable Care Act, and it's actually levied by the IRS. At the time that we had to pay that first year of that fee, Coventry had given us some incorrect numbers. It was new to everybody, and we discovered that after we had already made the payment. And if you've ever had any dealings with the IRS, sometimes when you send them money, it's kind of hard to get it back. But I have to recognize Angela Blake and Gina Wiedemann from our benefits department, and Jason Lacey, who was an attorney that helped work with us on this. Over the last year, they have spent a lot of time, and we actually have received a $2 million refund on that $3 million payment that we had made. So that's good news, and that will go back into those reserves, so it'll bring our $12 million down to $10 million in terms of what we need for that. The second item is, again, reduce even further the extra amount of money that we've put into the budget for enrollment. And I'm actually combining both the regular enrollment and the high needs enrollment. And on the cost increase list on the previous slide is the total of those 1.1 million. I'm going to recommend that we reduce that to just by $1 million, so we'll leave about $100,000 on the table, give us a room for a couple of teachers. The impact for us with regard to that is when we get into enrollment season and we start to see where our enrollment trends are, it may require that we may have to move some teachers around. Typically, the enrollment increases that are hardest to address are at the elementary level. And so working with Alicia and the elementary principals, we'll try and address those needs. We'll have a little bit of funding to be able to hire some teachers if we have to. So, but again, we're going to take a little bit of a risk there, but that may save some other cuts in other places. And the last one on this slide is, again, taking over a little bit of the risk in property insurance. I had a $1.6 million increase specified there. Part of that to make sure that we had enough reserves in the event that we had claims between now and the end of the fiscal year. Darren Musey has told me we're not going to have any hailstorms. So we're not going to have any additional claims. But again, it's taking over a little bit of risk, but we've had very good luck so far this year. The remaining $600,000 that is there as a cost increase, we're still waiting on a quote on our property casualty excess insurance. We are adding square footage, and we did finish the reappraisal of about 20 buildings this year, so we expect some increased values as well. Shannon Crissell and Angela Blake and I met with our consultant from USI and the underwriters for property and casualty, and I believe that they're going to work very hard at trying to keep any of those increases as minimal as possible. So we're hoping that $600,000 will also come down once we see a quote on that. So those that I just talked about are actually reductions to the cost increase. The next slide is an actual cut. This was on your options page from the 21st, and I'm asking permission to go ahead and implement the 10% reduction to non-FTE accounts. This will save us about $5 million. And I would also indicate that we're also trying or working on a couple of other initiatives that should help our buildings and our programs offset some of that cost reduction by leveraging our purchasing department. And while we always work with our buildings, we're going to, from an administrative level, push that a little bit more to try and save them some money through some getting better quotes and reducing the amount of sales tax that we pay and those types of things.
If I could on that, we're always looking for the best deal, so to speak, on supplies. With the increased use of online bids, those types of things, one of the problems you always had when you're looking at paper bids and warehousing and those types of things, when you bid large quantities, then had to store, and then we had to distribute. That's changed now with the ability to drop ship. And with Mr. Musey and purchasing, literally being able to take items, put them out, electronically and get bids back almost the next day. So that issue that we had with some of those continues to be more minimal. And so with that and working with the buildings as they think about planning and looking at their purchasing over the last couple years should help our purchasing department assist them and be able to do that and then not have the lag effect that we would have had in years past. So technology is helping us. Sophistication of our purchasing department, they are professionals in what they do. So we're going to maximize that as much as possible.
The other sub-bullet here is actually a recommendation, a suggestion that came from some employees and in discussing trying to look for ways to lower our print and copying costs, partly through not wasting as much paper, partly through trying to educate staff in regards to where it's the cheapest place to make that copy or print that copy. And so this is one that will have to be developed. Don't know exactly at this point what kind of impact or savings that'll be, but again, it will be savings that if the buildings subscribes to it, it's savings to their budget because they're having to pay for that paper. So if we're not using as much paper, it's saving them some funding there. So that's one that we'll work on to develop a little bit more. The next slide is about energy usage reduction. And there's a couple of bullets here. The first one, we've already started down this path. Kenny Hinkle has already started to check and reset all of the set points in our HVAC systems back to the district standards that have kind of wandered around a little bit, but he's finding pretty widespread differences in what those set points are. And again, we expect utility costs will be reduced by that $300,000 over the course of a whole year.
Lynn has a question.
I had a couple. One was earlier on the reducing the enrollment cost by $1 million. If that means fewer teachers hired, I'm assuming that means we might likely move teachers as an option, and I don't think we've done that before. Is that correct?
We try to do it, we try not to do it.
If we can help it.
If we can help it, but when we can add additional staff, that's what it's going to mean. You know, when you've planned for 3 sections and there's only enough students for 2 large sections,
Yeah.
then the building will have to reconfigure and make 2 classes, and that 3rd section teacher may need to move to another building because we planned for 2 and ended up with 3. And Dr. Thompson and Mr. Faflick monitor that each day as we go through enrollment so that they can see what happens. But, you know, we always get a number of students that will come in and enroll after the holidays. So, you know, we haven't done that in the past, and in as much as possible, but we may end up, you know, a week into school having to do that if we don't have the ability to add additional staff.
Okay. And then the issue on using the purchasing department, I'm assuming one of the drawbacks on that would be there'd be fewer vendors, but we'd have a tighter control of what we're spending, and staff would have to prepare a little bit earlier. They just couldn't run out to the store and buy something, you know, if they wanted to save that extra amount of money. That could add up to quite a bit over a period of time as well. I think in both cases, I want to point out that, you know, there are some drawbacks. They're not, there's some costs, I guess, to that, in the sense if it's a loss of a local vendor, you know, over somebody that goes out of town. So yes, they're efficient, but at the same point, there's a cost to staff and to people to do what we're doing. So
That's correct, and we administration will not force anyone to not purchase from a vendor. If they choose to purchase from a vendor, they're still allowed.
But it's
to
how
do
they
that.
manage their account.
Yeah.
I mean,
So it'll be up to them to manage their budget and their accounts to maximize some of those savings.
Yeah.
One of the places that we could see some savings is in sales tax, and of course we typically don't pay we shouldn't be paying sales tax, except when someone goes out and purchases something and asks to be reimbursed, or we pay through petty cash. If an employee goes out and buys something, we're obligated to pay that employee the sales tax as well. So by working through the purchasing department and trying to minimize that, watching our P cards a little closer in terms of that, just the sales tax savings alone could be 5%. So there's a big communication effort going to be made, and I have to credit Jonathan Weiss, our new purchasing director, for really getting into this and pulling some data and starting to communicate very, very well out with the building. So we're just going to try and enhance that as much as we can.
Good. All right. Thank you.
We have another question, Mike.
On your thermostat set points, we've talked about that a bunch. And I know at my house, I've strategically set our set points to go off at the right time so that we maximize our energy efficient. My wife, when she gets hot, walks over and pushes the cool button. Is there a restriction on that where it's controlled from a central location, or is it building to building, so if somebody decides they're hot, they can cool themselves down? Or
All of our main systems are controlled centrally, and those set points are controlled there. And one of the things that has happened over time is we've had a lot of those requests. Well, my room's too hot, would you? And there hasn't been any monitoring or control of that. But the employee in the room cannot go over and push a button and change their temperature. But they can call and make a request. And part of the challenge with anything like this is once we get them set, then listening and understanding what some of the challenges are. We may find that we have some places in our buildings and some things where the controls really aren't working like they should. So the first attempt will be, we've got the set point right, why is the temperature not right? And we also have some special locations where I know we have some employees that have special needs, and their set points will be based on directives or whatever through a 504 plan or doctor's notes. So we do have some of that type of thing too. So the other one under the energy usage, and this is a recommendation that I will bring back to you in the form of some guidelines for you to approve, consider and approve. But we're looking at the possibility of eliminating non-essential personal electrical equipment and appliances. These are the mini fridges and the microwaves and all that kind of stuff that populate a lot of our classrooms and buildings. And we will work with the principals and the staff in terms of trying to develop some guidelines to determine what is non-essential and how we might best address the actual needs in a particular building. And sometimes we don't have enough capacity either through refrigeration or microwaves to address some of those needs. So we'll try and work with each building and be able to address some of those needs. And then even we'll probably look at building into the guidelines the ability for individual employees, if they really want to have that little mini fridge in their classroom just for their own convenience, then they can pay a fee to cover the cost of the utility or the electricity for a year. So we'll work those guidelines up. We'll communicate a lot with the buildings through the principals to try and develop something that actually will get us some savings and not turn Dr. Thompson into the refrigerator cop. So, there's got to be some balance with that, and we certainly understand that. So, the next option, at the last meeting, we looked at transportation, and we were given the directive to come back with a recommendation. We don't have that recommendation yet, and I wanted to explain a little bit why. We will come back with a recommendation, but since that meeting, we have had a lot of conversations through building principals, through staff, and are beginning to see or are seeing some other options that we need to consider. Whether they be pairing of schools or other types of issues with the goal of reducing the number of buses at that second tier. So we're investigating those some more. So what I'm asking as a direction from you tonight is that at a minimum, we need to find $1 million worth of savings to cover that cost increases that I had earlier on that earlier slide. So that will become the target for our recommendation back to you. But we will do what we can to exceed that, but we need to try and make that kind of as the minimum that we shoot for. But we will come back to you with an option or recommendation and some more discussion around this one before we would implement anything. Okay. So here's the summary of what I just went through. So there's our $22.7 million of cost increase as of tonight. And you can see the negative numbers there coming down. So the remaining cost increase that we have left to address, if all of this is implemented and these numbers hold, is down to $12.1 million. So this becomes our look at a phase one reduction to our budget to address the cost increases that we have outlined. And I don't think I'm not asking for a vote of any kind on this, but just consensus or direction that I'll continue to develop these. There are a couple of things I'll have to come back to you with specific recommendations on the transportation and the guidelines and some things like that. So if you don't have any specific comments or other questions or whatever, I'll try and move ahead with these.
Okay, I would like to go back a little bit on the phase one where we look at purchasing. And again, in the past, the board has always hoped to keep as much local as we could. Is this going to have a significant bearing that you would expect on that goal, or is that?
A little bit difficult to really answer that. All of the vendors will be given the opportunity to quote and bid on these. And this isn't like, we're not talking about huge bids. The purchasing department will be working with individual buildings or groups of buildings to try and pull together, I need a quote on this particular kind of thing. So we'll go out to all of the vendors, local as well as otherwise, to see if we can generate the best savings. Now, as I indicated before too, we will not force any of our buildings to have to buy from a particular vendor. So if they choose to buy from someone else, they'll have that prerogative.
But this isn't changing our list of vendors. I mean, we've always had that option?
Yes.
Or okay, so this really wouldn't be anything new in
well,
that sense.
What's new about it is that it's a more concerted effort by our purchasing department to get better pricing
Okay.
and a little bit more communication out with the buildings. But we still have the same vendor list, and we know we get better prices from this one and this one, depending on the products and that sort of thing. So we'll try and leverage some of that knowledge to save the money that we possibly can.
Budgets have predominantly at the building level been site-based managed. And our intent would be that, say you take the top 100 items as an example that are purchased, would be to bid those items and then be able to communicate that so that building principals have that clear communication that if I'm going to buy folders, here are the last 5 bids we've had, and this is what that pricing looks like. So knowing that if I buy from vendor A, that is a cheaper price. Our principals are going to look at those prices, and they're going to want to stretch their budgets as far as they possibly can. So they're going to look for those cheaper prices, and because of the ability to do those types of bids on a regular basis, we can do that. So if price points change, every 9 weeks or 5 weeks, then buildings would have that updated information, as well as when they go and look up. Good example is looking at, say, capital outlay that the building capital outlay, and they're wanting to upgrade and replace some of the furniture in the library. Well, when you've got 4 or 5 buildings that are having that type of conversation, and purchasing can help pull those together and do the legwork for the buildings, there's the potential that there could be some additional savings. So it's really about the communication. The vendors list won't change. To your question about could it have, into Mr. Rogers' impact on local businesses, yes, it's quite possible, because if they're not the lowest price point, they're most likely not going to receive that business. Until we do this on a more regular basis. We do it when we order large quantities that we store in the warehouse, those types of things. But those individual building expenses that principals and staff make decisions on throughout the year, we think there can be some additional savings with communication and better understanding of the price points that are available.
Okay, we have a question from Cheryl.
Yeah, I have one question, and then I want a little bit of a clarification on what you want from us. The P cards that we have out there, the cards that a staff person can take and go to a local business and buy something for their classroom, bring it back in. Are we looking at pulling those in tighter if we go to this more centralized system of purchasing things?
We haven't decided to do that yet. I think part of the side of the P cards is to educate our staff so that when they go out and purchase something with a P card, they go to a place that where we don't have to pay tax. The tax side of the P card is one that we're going to try and that's what we're going to try and manage more effectively. At this point in time, I don't think there's any intent to try and pull those back necessarily. We have talked about it, but I think we're going to try and look for other ways to save some of that funding. There is, you can get on both sides of that P card issue. It is certainly is a convenience, and people tend to not plan well. But at the same time, if we do have vendors out there that we know we can get discounts with and that sort of thing, even using the P card and that sort of thing, then we'll try and go that direction first. If we don't have as much success there, then we may look at trying to restrict those in some way. But right now, we're not.
Okay.
And that's part of where we think we can find the savings, is because purchasing has done an in-depth analysis of what's purchased with the P cards. So then being able to look at those items, find is there a better price point through a vendor, and being able to communicate to say, if you don't go to Walmart to purchase folders and you'll purchase through, online through Office Depot, for example, it'll be at a reduced point. So it's really, that's why we feel we can get some additional dollars, is because of that P card analysis, looking back over the last couple years and saying, okay, we spent X amount with these vendors for these products, and as Mr. Musey and his staff had then compared the cost, we think that we can provide that information to the buildings so that they're just better prepared to make a better decision around where the best value is in the items that they want.
And part of that is being able to communicate out to the people who are going to Walmart. That if they go to whatever site we set up, however we set it up, and check that first, and then the local using the P card somewhere locally.
It's as much about education and getting people to think about that differently as anything else.
Right.
No one's intending to purchase a product that's more expensive. Everybody's always looking for that, but with the expertise our purchasing has, being able to communicate that, provide that information, we think we can continue to stretch and get some better value in some of those areas.
Okay.
And one of the things too on the P cards is we see a lot of online purchases with P cards, and as you all have experienced, you go to buy something online and they want you to set up an account and so on and so forth. Well, we have online vendors out there that we have district accounts with that will not charge us sales tax and reduced shipping and those types of things. That's part of the education process as well, to get them our staff and principals to understand that if you want to go to a website to order something, use our district account, log in and that sort of thing, so that we get the proper discounts and no sales tax and possibly no shipping. So
Right.
that's part of the education.
And that's
too.
another piece that purchasing has worked diligently with some of the vendors. They've already taken care of the sales tax component. So when the P card is used, it's automatically configured so that there's no sales tax. Not every vendor will do that. So again, being able to communicate and say, when you use your P card in these spots, sales tax has already been taken care of and eliminated, and it really is as much about leveraging our expertise and then communicating and educating, and knowing the budget constraints. I think our staff will wholeheartedly endorse that and be very explicit in their purchases and in the decisions they make, and we hope it'll offset these cuts even further.
Thank you. Another question is on transportation and bringing it down to that $1 million that you're looking at for transportation. I assume that, and this is kind of wrapped around my question on what it is that you want us to do tonight. Everything is still on the table. Hazardous routes, looking at neighborhood stops as opposed to corner stops, all the things that we've heard are still on the table, and you're going to bring a plan back to us that says, here's what we're suggesting to get to the $1 million. Is that
exactly?
okay?
Yes.
That's what I thought, but I wanted to make sure, because basically with the pieces that are listed on this, your slide that had going from 22 to 12 million, yeah.
Oh,
No,
sorry,
the
wrong
one,
one.
yeah, the one a little later.
There we go.
Yeah, this one. With these pieces in between here, what you want us to do tonight is simply say, go ahead and begin to research this, bring us back. You're not asking us for a decision tonight on these, correct?
What I'll move ahead with is on the items that are a direct reduction in the cost increases. Okay, then I'll apply those to our cost increase, and the 10% reduction, we'll go ahead and build those budgets in that way. And the energy pieces we're working through those. And the two things that'll come back to you for final consideration will be the guidelines on the non-essential appliance elimination and those fees. I'll come back to you with guidelines on that so you can see what we're planning and say yay or nay on that one. And then the transportation will come back with a plan that will capture at least $1 million. But everything we've discussed, and actually a few more things that we've uncovered since the last meeting, will be part of that transportation consideration.
Okay, very fine. Thank you.
We just want to be able to answer your questions tonight, show you how we can reduce with non-FTE, those types of things. And then if there were any significant concerns you had, that you'd be able to express that this evening, because we don't want to continue the research piece and the work behind each of these if there was something that really created heartburn with the board, knowing that we'll bring back more detail on several of those.
And with that, I'm okay with doing that.
Lynn?
This 10% reduction in non-FTE accounts is actually the second one, is it
Correct.
not? It's almost, this would be a $10 million cut from where we were a year ago.
Actually, 11.5.
11.5 million, because we cut 6.5 out of this year's budget.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
okay. So they're really going to be operating on less than, 80% of their budget from 2 years ago.
Yes.
So, okay. I think that's important to note, too.
Yes. Any other questions here? Okay, I'll move on. The next couple of slides are just information about what we're working on. These are a couple of things we've talked about. And the health reserves, that's the biggest piece of our cost increase. And so it's the one that we're going to try and develop as best we can. I think the original request that I had was to figure out a way to fill that hole not using any general fund money. And I think you saw that really didn't provide us a very good option. So we are still researching that, and we are developing multiple options that are being developed and looked at. And I will say that some of them will require negotiation. So we'll come back to you with some information about what that'll look like, and so that we can have a good discussion around that. The options that we will present will include the two bullets on this slide, which are not part of negotiations, and we have talked about that, about these two particular ones. The retiree premiums that were recommended by the Employee Health Advisory Committee, which will generate about $1.7 million of additional revenue based on current membership and that sort of thing, will be part of options that we look at. And the mandatory move to the POS network, which requires employees to designate a primary care physician, that will also be part of the recommendation. That actually generates about $2.7 million in reduction, basically, in claims and fees. So those two pieces will be part of any options that we come to you with. And again, I'm not asking, that's not a done deal right now. That'll come to you as part of the recommendation. So when we get to that point, if you have questions or concerns about either one of those two, you'll still have an option to say yay or nay on those, but they will be included along with other possible plan design changes or that type of thing. And incidentally, when I talked to you earlier about changes to get there, I had indicated some changes to be made on July 1. Will not recommend that, mostly because it is so difficult to communicate with staff quickly enough on those types of things, and because of open enrollment issues and that sort of thing. So the recommendations that we'll come back to you with, if there are changes, it will involve a change based on a January 1 plan year date moving forward. But what we will be considering is additional plan design options. And we are asking for input from the Employee Health Advisory Committee. They will actually be looking at some of that information this week. So we'll get some input from that group, and then we'll come back to the board when we have a plan design of recommendations. And you will probably see more than one recommendation when we come back to you with that. So because there's a lot of different options, so we'll come back with a couple of options for you to look at.
And we have a question from Joy.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, Jim. Thanks. On slide 9, where you talk about the mandatory move to the POS network, and you said that could be a $2 million savings, is that because the primary care physician is acting as a gatekeeper, or is that because we're using a network with negotiated lower prices, or both?
Actually, both.
Okay.
The primary care physician does act as a gatekeeper for us, but the network is also, the discounts in the network are also greater through this type of a process. And the information that we have indicates that 80 to 90% of our employees have a physician that is in that network, that primary care physician network. So again, it's a matter of education for that group of employees that maybe don't have one designated at this point between now and whenever we decide this and move forward with it, so that they can get signed up with a primary care physician. But it's a combination of the gatekeeper aspect and greater discounts within that network.
So that aspect of the gatekeeper is, if I need to go to a cardiologist, I have to go through my PCP to get the referral, as opposed to I call the cardiologist to make an appointment.
You can still call the cardiologist. It's just that the cost then is greater to you. There's a higher copay or
Okay.
co-insurance on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on the health? The next one that we are looking at has to do with calendar options. And you actually heard from our Super SAC folks about the first one, about the 4-day week. And that was listed as one of your options, and it is still under consideration. We're not taking anything off the table. However, the reason I bring this to you tonight is that we have had some suggestions from employees to consider another option in looking at calendar. And that would be to lengthen the instructional day and shorten the calendar. And Really, we work off of a 1,116-hour instruction requirement from KSDE. So obviously, by lengthening the instruction day and getting to that 1,116 hours sooner, you can reduce the actual contact or instructional calendar as it goes with that. So we are looking at that and trying to analyze what savings we might have with regard to that and the impact not only to the instructional day, but other aspects of, if the day's 30 minutes longer, for instance, what does that mean for after school? What does that mean for parents? What does that mean for our athletics and activities and that sort of thing? So, but we are pretty confident that we can reduce the number of days and make some savings primarily in transportation. But it does mean changes in the workday. So again, this also would be one that would have to be negotiated as well. But it could produce some significant savings depending on how that calendar was arranged. So more investigation. I'm not sure exactly when we might come back to you with a recommendation on this, but again, it is one of the things that would have to be negotiated, so we wouldn't propose anything unless it's going through that system and part of that process. Okay. Timeline and next steps. It's my hope and desire that the major decisions that we can have made by early May, if possible. And part of that reasoning is just to be able to get the big pieces of the budget so we know where some of the reductions are, and if there are any staff reductions involved, that we can have the time necessary to work through that process. There are currently 2 scheduled board meetings prior to the end of the school term, April 25th and May 9th. And sort of what we have lined out tonight, you saw phase 1 that took about $10 million off the list. April 25th will come to you with phase 2, but actually we'll come back with possibly some final recommendations like we talked about on the phase 1 piece of it. And then phase 2 options and possible recommendations. And it'll probably be kind of like tonight. We'll have some things that are options that we're looking at to get your direction on for sure. We may have some specific recommendations as well at that point. And then the May 9th meeting would again be the same sort of thing, revise, review, possibly finalize the phase 2 recommendations and look at phase 3, hopefully to get to the big picture side of making getting the budget to balance. Now, under that same thinking, the phase 3, there may be some options that we present or recommendations that you're not ready to actually take action on at that point. So we may need to ask for a special board meeting to finalize some of those recommendations. We'll see when we get there. As we get into phase 2, I think we'll have a better idea of what that might mean in phase 3. And if we can make those decisions on the 9th, that'd be great. But if there are decisions that you need some time to reflect, answer questions and that sort of thing, then we'll look to try and schedule another meeting after that, with the goal of trying to have the major decisions done by that time. There'll still be little stuff that we'll be working on to actually finalize and balance the budget, but that gives us the big framework under which to work. And as you may remember, when we get into the month of July, we're into budget adoption season. The first part of the month, the budget staff will be working to develop and finalize the final part of the budget, so that on July 25th, we will propose a date for the notice of hearing. So you will be asked to approve a date for that hearing. You'll see the budget. You'll see what's involved with it at that point. Then we publish the notice of hearing and establish the hearing date. For example, as August 8 for the proposed hearing and adoption of the budget. This is similar to what we've done in the past. And by using those two dates, it still gives us actually one more board meeting before the budget actually has to be adopted and sent. I think you've got a meeting scheduled on August 22nd, so if those dates don't work out, we can't come to finalization of the budget. You have one more meeting in the month of August before you have to pull the trigger on it. So,
And we have a question from Cheryl.
Okay, my question is on the negotiated items. Tonight, you mentioned the calendar and the healthcare plan that need to go into negotiations. And the timeline in the negotiations don't necessarily match up because negotiations won't be happening that soon. So what do we do about that?
well, we'll get as close as we can. And if, and I'm not part of the negotiation, I don't have any idea exactly how that may play out, but I think by the time we get specific, essentially to May 9th, we may have some idea of the direction that may go, so we'll know how to react to it. And again, as I've talked about kind of from the start of this, there may be some things that we look at and consider this year that don't happen necessarily this year that might have to happen next year. So I think that's part of the rationale there too. We need to get it out there and have it on the plate to at least be talked about. If we can't get there soon enough, then that probably has to be something for consideration for the next year.
I think we'll be very upfront. This is option A. If you'll work with us, if not, then it'll be option B. And for option A, here's the timeline that we're going to have to meet if this is actually going to be considered as part of our budget discussion. So, we haven't started that process yet, but I see that just being upfront and explaining how it is, and then we'll see where it goes from there.
Thank you.
Lynn?
Well, Jim, thank you. The 22.7 is much better than the 30 million that we looked at, and 12.1 is
even better.
Even better. But I guess I don't want to mislead anybody to think that that's last 12.1 is going to be easy. We're still talking about lots of things that are painful, and I guess having this time frame and thinking about that, we do need to be ready to to discuss all these things in more detail because they are affecting people's jobs, they're affecting people's kids, and one of the things that we've not talked about, and I guess I would like to have some additional information, would be what the Eagle editorial talked about today was the possible revenue enhancement with the Senate bill that got passed, the equity non-fix is what I call it. The only option on that is it does let us raise our LOB to 33% instead of 31%. And quite frankly, it's offended me multiple times at this table where local taxpayers have had to pony up for what the state is not doing. So to tell you the truth, I'm not sure if I could support it, but even more importantly, I'm not sure if it will withstand, the constitutional test, and if the Supreme Court does not rule it positive, and we go ahead and plan on that, we could be back to square one of cutting more. It'd be great one day to say, hey, 6 million of this 12.1 is covered, but at the same point, if we're back to August 1st, all of a sudden having to scramble, knowing how short a time frame it's going to be with the Supreme Courts and stuff. So I guess I would just like to see, the pros and cons of what that would cost, what that is, because again, I think citizens need to understand what that means locally when the state does not do their part of the bargain, and particularly without the equity portion. That's the biggest painful point, is that because the state is not equalizing that, it's very easy for Johnson County to raise that mill levy, but it's not easy for poorer districts to do that. It's a much bigger impact. So I appreciate that.
We will definitely come back on the 25th with some of that information. We have not talked about that at the table until the governor signed it. It didn't become law. And for the reasons, Mr. Rogers, you you articulated. Concern is we build a budget around that idea, and if it's found to be unconstitutional, we're not going to have the time to work through and do due diligence. So again, that's probably one of those where if it's found constitutional and the board would elect to do that, this is what it means and this is how it impacts our budget. At the same time, building a budget that is reflective of it if it's not found to be constitutional, so that we're able to be as conservative as we possibly can as we prepare for the next fiscal year.
Yeah, I think that would be very wise so that we have both options and know what the cost would be to us. Thank you.
And actually, before you move into the second part of your presentation, I really would like to take the opportunity to thank you for what you have done. For me, it's difficult when I know we've had employees that have gone several years, they've stuck with us without raises, and to say thank you, we look at the possibility of cutting their jobs. That has been something that just has not set very well with me, and so I want to acknowledge and appreciate the additional time that you've taken, that administration has taken to look at different ways of doing things without having the significant impact on FTE. I know oftentimes the thought is, well, if you find these efficiencies, then you weren't operating. We actually are looking at increasing the workload for everyone to save positions, and I appreciate your doing this. It actually is in line with what I've certainly been hoping for.
Well, I appreciate your thoughts. There's nothing fun about any of this, as you well know, and so I think we get through it trying to make the best decisions that we possibly can, based on information that we can present, so that we make a good decision, make a good bad decision. Yeah. So